Namaste, namaste. Welcome to our meditation on anger, the rasa of anger, and its many solutions, one of which is abundance. First things first, we're just going to relax brain, drop into the heart, relax neck and shoulders. Just relaxing, opening, refreshing, allowing. Beautiful breath coming in. Opening up worlds, opening up inner worlds. So we breathe. Just allow it's like the mud in the pond to settle down. To see to the bottom of things. To see into the depths with clarity. We meditate. We harmonize. We align. Letting that silence do its magic. The Dalai Lama speaks of consciousness as an eternal continuum. And when asked the question, where does anger come from? He says it's mysterious. It arises from the beginning. It's always there, right? These afflictions are always there. Yet, he says, they can come to an end. So this is very reassuring, right? That the affliction of anger and hatred, on some level, is considered the worst. It's just the worst, right? It destroys your virtue. It destroys your health, ultimately. Anger gone amok, anger gone beyond its appropriateness. Aristotle himself used that word, appropriate. That's how he described the use of anger to be appropriate. So I can see all you restless bombs out there needing a healing balm. All right, so we're just going to defrag all that restless bomb. B-O-M-B bombs, replace it with the B-A-L-M bombs. Drop all that stuff into the earth. Drop into that continuum of consciousness that Dalai Lama refers to. He says that's the justification for rebirth, actually, that there is this eternal continuum that cannot be created by matter. So if it can't be created by matter, it's always there. And so we can keep coming in and out of matter, and it doesn't really matter, just as long as we're not in denial and pushing stuff down into materiality and density. That's a different kind of matter, not the best kind of matter. So we want to arc towards spaciousness, beautiful feeling. Yes, but I can see those of you requesting work on the anger. So what we're going to do today is unpack it, try to understand what it is. I've been doing some research myself, reading what the Dalai Lama has to say about it, what Daniel Goleman on his book Emotional Intelligence, and just a variety of other sources. Anger is an energy. Let's just start with that. Let's just, to make this comprehensible, because this complex subject, let's work with this in the body in a meditative way. So it's not just an intellectual activity. We're taking some of these understandings, kind of looking inside, and how do we want to balance with them. So first things first would be to notice what's happening in your body right now. If you're angry, what does that feel like? Just feel what is ultimately the negative charge in the body. Right? If you're at peace, if there's no negative charge, maybe you don't need this lecture. You don't need this meditation. But who doesn't have some sort of worry, anxiety, angry thing going on, right? I've yet to meet someone who is free completely of this. So I'm just going to drop inside and let's take this curious statement that researchers have discovered, curiously, that worry is a solution to anxiety. It's like, how does that work? It's like, this seems like they're the same thing. But here's an interesting research point that they came up with. That the mind has an eye, in a sense, and the mind has an ear. And when the mind goes into anxiety, it's seeing some kind of visual image that's catastrophic, right? Somewhere in the subtle reaches of our consciousness is a scary picture, maybe many scary pictures. And so in order to shift the brain from this visual freak out, the body has ingeniously over centuries and millennia figured out a way to distract from this, which is to go to the ear of the mind, which is listening to language. And so language kicks in and sort of hijacks the show, right? It takes you out of this visual and into this worry continuum, which is kind of a spiraling, cascading, ascending, sometimes highly escalating series of thoughts. But curiously, worry likes to congratulate itself because it acts as a kind of amulet, acts as a kind of superstitious tool that says, hey, because I'm worrying, bad things aren't happening. And therefore worry becomes kind of enshrined in us as sort of a, hey, we're going to worry and we're going to get great results. Now, let's just back up a little bit. There's obviously in your experience good worrying and bad worrying. So what is the good worrying? It's the planning, anticipating bad things and preparing, right? It's a survival skill. We use it to basically, as the Dalai Lama recommends, if there's a bad situation, you immediately scope it out, figure out what's going on. Is this going to kill you? Is it a threat? How are you going to deal with this? And a lot of these teachers, from Marshall Rosenberg to the Dalai Lama, maybe most spiritual teachers, would make the case that the protective use of force is sometimes necessary. They call it taking countermeasures, right? So if this fiend or bad boy, bad person is going to escalate their abuse, it serves to tone them down in some form or fashion. Otherwise, they'll think it's okay and habituate into some kind of justifiable, destruction of you. So protective use of force, good thing to do. But as the Dalai Lama says, once the deed is done, once some catastrophe has happened, something's broken, it's done. Revenge doesn't work, right? That's a useless thing at that point. We want, restorative justice at that point, not, punishment. Although the mind would probably like to go to punishment just because it, wants to, get that feeling processed. Okay, that's a lot of information. Let's just breathe. Just kind of process that for a minute. That worry can take over, can hijack your show. It's kind of a low-grade melodrama that's really good at distracting you from anxiety. So if you're worrying, don't worry. Well, if they say, don't worry, be happy, that works for maybe lighter weight stuff, right? Because you can just pop right into that. But if it's chronic, right? If your concerns are deeply debilitating and damaging you, just someone telling you to be happy is not going to work, right? You need a lot more than that. And I would say the number one thing these teachers recommend would be called distraction. Distraction is the trick, right? Because someone's all flipped out, you say, oh, look over here. Give them $10,000, right? They're not going to be angry after that. Whoa, right? You can distract them with abundance. You can shower them with something wonderful. Because actually, that's why they're angry, probably. They don't have the wonderful thing they wish they had. They're feeling lost. They're feeling rejected. Bad feeling, right? So that anger starts as a kind of lost sadness thing, right? Evolves into kind of you get upset, and then it escalates into, could be rage, right? At some certain point where you actually might feel your life is being threatened. Okay, so let's drop back into the body. Seems like the brain can handle a certain amount of information and needs a little break. So use those thoughts. How has worry resolved anxiety for you? Or if it has, check in with that. That's a really interesting thought. How have you weaponized worry ultimately to your advantage to create an ongoing distraction from the present moment ultimately, right? Because resistance builds up, and that's Carl Jung himself would say that, what is mental disease? It's kind of this avoidance program, right? You're not really willing to legitimately experience what's happening, right? You somehow run, right? Created shadow, distraction. There's another variety. So distraction is great. Distraction just shifts the thing. They've discovered with insomnia, it's not a somatic issue, actually. It's a worry issue. So people who can't sleep, right, their mind won't stop. So in good Chinese fashion, you want to use the opposite to fix the thing, right? If your head's spinning around, ground your feet, right? In the sort of insomnia realm, you want to actually use somatic to interfere with the mental, right? If you're having a somatic issue, you want to maybe use the mental to extract you from that, right? Use the opposite to balance. So we're breathing. The word somatic refers to the body. We live in a body. Body intelligence is, in my experience, smarter than me, smarter than us. So listen to the body. The mind can be a kind of freak show. So the body is there to ground us. And sometimes it seems like we have a problem in order to get us out of our head, right? Your body is kind of using distraction. So, if you have a headache, someone kicks you in the leg, back to work. So we're distracting in order to get out of the endless loop cycle of worry. So there's all sorts of things you can distract yourself with. One recommendation is, if you're having terror thoughts, is you actually just document them with paper. Just write them down, and then your brain can reappraise them, can sort of look at them and kind of figure them out better. So then that reduces the pressure of that problem. In meditating on this subject, I have a whole list of solutions that various people suggest that we can get into. But first, I think it's good to look even deeper at what is the problem, what's happening in the brain chemistry, what's going on with the catecholamines and basically the opioids in the body. So just feeling your body. what's happening. Are you angry? Are you sad? Are you just sort of numb? One thing I discovered in the research is there's a category of people called unflappables. And unflappables have a kind of positive outlook all the time. I probably qualify because I can be unflappable, and then I notice that my fingers are shaking when I'm playing the tambour or something. My body is sort of maybe revealing more stress than my mind is even acknowledging. And so why is that the case? This is fascinating research. They found out that the left frontal lobe and the right frontal lobe determine positive and negative experience. And so, in the process of getting you to the positive side of your brain, sometimes the right brain, when it first processes information, it's like CNN. It will edit that somehow, not inform you. It's sort of like, don't tell mom. It's like the brain goes, oh, this is charged information. We better not reveal this to the person because they could get upset, right? The brain wants to actually suppress it. And it found that with neutral languaging, it just went right to the left brain, no problem. But if there was a charge, if it was loaded, if it had some sort of problem, the brain is gonna, it's like put it on delay. And so that you pop back into this positive part of your left brain, it's like, there's no problem, right? And meanwhile, your brain is sort of pushing it into your body, and then this stress has to kind of come out in a different way, possibly. So that's why we could have kind of a split, right? That you can just feel fine, and you realize that your body is not fine. And it can work the other way. Your body can be fine, and your mind is crazed. But with this first example, when people are doing something called spiritual bypass, meaning, well, here's an example of spiritual bypass. There was a famous musician in the New Age world, had his house burned down in the fires up north, and in thanking people, it was just a long series of responses on Facebook, and he got political at one point, and there were people going, oh, now that you've gotten political, I'm not going to listen to you anymore until you stop being political. I only want to listen to your love music. That's understandable. But isn't there a kind of spiritual bypass going on there? It's like, I'm not going to accept you if you're going to talk about something with shadow, right? I'm only going to look at the light and avoid the shadow. So anyway, this can happen, right? So maybe even someone to the highest gurus, actually, in my opinion. They're maybe professional spiritual bypassers. And actually that might not be such a bad thing at that level, because on some level that says you have autonomic control of your nervous system and you can completely flatten the problem if you need to. Tibetan monks have this capacity, right? They can sit out, melt wet blankets out in the cold off their body by just heating up, right? So most of us can't do that, but we heat up in a different way, right? The emotional brain heats up, and then how do we cool it down? Well, time and space, that's one solution. This intervention of using cognitive intelligence to figure out what is the lie here, what is the distortion, what is the ignorance that's unfolding. And if you can go in and just chang the ignorance, right, you've nipped it in the bud. That is the number one suggestion of all of these folks who study this stuff, right? You got to get it early before people act on it. Once people act on their anger, they could destroy their most beautiful possessions. It's crazy, right? We go crazy. Marshall Rosenberg says, he says, you're dead in the head when you're angry. The Dalai Lama says basically your cognitive functions shut down, your greatest skills, which is discrimination and ability to understand things, gone. reaches a certain point, you're a crazy person. Not even mitigating information can stop it at that point. You could tell someone who's really mad they thought someone stole their sunglasses, and you point out to them that, hey, what are those? Oh, my sunglasses. So this anger that was so suddenly gone, right? Because how real is it? It's not based on, these negative emotions are not based on a strong foundation, says the Dalai Lama. Whereas the good ones, wisdom, compassion, those are eternal virtues. Those have been proven, right? But these afflictions, negative emotions, they're there to protect you on some level. They have a value. But, one step up and they're a problem. So, again, let's breathe. Just notice what might be afflicting you. Which emotions, there's a lot of emotions that can afflict us. From jealousy to rage, confusion. The list is long. Let me add at this moment that one of the solutions that are not in these books, or maybe the Dalai Lama would understand it in a different way, but would be called energetic intervention. In other words, that's what energy healers profess to do, right? I think different people are more successful than others, but there's a skill in using energy to negate charge, to neutralize the charge. And since anger and rage and hatred are a function of accumulated charge, those situations where suddenly you're furious and then you're not is fully explainable by the deletion of the charge, however it occurred. Right? Whether you just snapped out of it or somebody gave you so much love that you melted. So this charge is deletable. That's the good news. And it's deletable in therapy, right? That's what therapists do. They eventually allow you to do something called cognitive reframing, which means you see the problem differently. What would be a fun example? Like you have a girlfriend that you left, or she left you, and you're all upset, and Claudia left me, more. And then all of a sudden someone says, she's kind of a doink. What were you going out with her for? And then you're like, yeah, you're right. And then you've reframed it. Suddenly you're not so upset that Claudia is gone, right? Because you have a new understanding. So we breathe. Nice deep breath. So we reframe, right? That's very doable. Just see it differently. There's funny situations with that where they're describing these call it experiments they did where they would pay volunteers, and the volunteers were set up to hire someone, but the person they were set up to hire comes in and abuses them, says something horrible to them. They're all, well, what's the deal with this guy? And then he goes off down the hall to some phone call, and somebody else comes in and says, oh, hey, don't pay any attention. That guy, his mother just died of some horrible disease, and his wife is leaving him, and his life is falling apart. And everyone's like, oh, the poor guy, So they feel compassion, and that mitigates it. However, it's kind of funny. If this person actually said something so heinous that these folks could not overlook, even the mitigating information is not going to do it. The hiring committee is like, well, so what, right? That's their response. It's like, he's an idiot, right? It doesn't even matter. Compassion is no longer working. So that's something that's good to, when you're looking for solutions, keep in mind. There's different states of consciousness, right? There's different levels where this occurs. So we breathe, always coming back to the oxygen is the essence of meditation, coming back to stillness. The mind goes off, thinks a few thoughts, we come home, we travel again, we come home. It's sort of like your daily. You go to work, you come home. Meditation is sort of like a mini commute, right? We go out and process and come back and, look at the jewels we've just uncovered. So that might have neutralized different things in you, even in this moment, right? Just hearing good information can neutralize misunderstanding or bad feelings. Information just drops right in like the mail. Glad to be your good friend there, Lily. Thank you for being my friend, everyone. When we have this kind of resonance, we act as more than one person, right? We can sort of beam out and amplify whatever's going on into a giant field, possibly influence the world profoundly. Let the stillness clear any illness. And let's just do this little practice for a minute. We mentioned this earlier. Noticing the little scary things that might live on the periphery of your consciousness. It's like they might hide out. Maybe you can't see them right now. What are these fleeting images of scariness that might exist in your subconscious, unconscious? They could be coming down from your ancestors. They could be culturally embedded. They could be from Fox News. It could be from any kind of news. They could be from your imagination. Scary, right? But if you notice them and then do these, like the somatic application, self-soothing. That's what we're doing. That's what they advise, right? To self-soothe, laugh. It reduces inflammation. I don't know, it reduces inflammation. And definitely reduces inflammation. Lowers the hormonal surge, laughing, right? Balances us. Lightness, abundance. The opposite of any problem is the opposite of motion. So we breathe. And so we're noticing your worry spiral if you have one. And so part of the technology of meditation, in a sense, is you build a bigger space around that, so that that more limited. We breathe. Get bigger than your problem, right? That's the idea. If your problem is a huge monster, then we need to reduce this in size. There's a story, actually, a Taoist story, I believe, where the swordsman goes to the cave to fight the dragon, and it's a huge dragon, and he realizes he can't possibly fight this dragon, and so he goes home and kind of depressed. But in his good work in his life, he raises his family and does good dharma. And then he gets this idea, he wants to go back and check out this dragon again once he's an old man. And he goes to the cave and can't find the dragon. So he's looking around. There's a lizard there. And he has this revelation, right, that his good work, his patience, right, his equanimity, this reduced the dragon. Right? He didn't have to fight the dragon in the cave. He fought the dragon telepathically back home. So that's a beautiful analogy for telepathic consciousness, right? We're working these issues out with each other while we're in real time, even if the person is far away, right? Because they're thinking about you, you're thinking about each other. Pretty soon you process, and when you finally meet up, hey, how you doing, right? That anger has been worked out on a deeper level. So that's kind of the beauty of time and space, and the fact that we are actively engaging telepathically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually with everyone else. I think, well, how's that possible? I'm not psychic, right? Well, actually, you don't have to be psychic. Everyone is totally telepathic. Someone's asking patience, how? Okay, so patience comes from application of these principles we're talking about. We meditate. Prayer is a form of communing with higher power and strengthening. Patience comes from doing what we're going to do right now. We just breathe and reframe, relativize. What's more important than that? Is your well-being, your beautiful feeling. These lamas urge us that life is for happiness, and these distortions need to be addressed. They're going to arise. They come from the beginninglessness, right? They're there. You can't, these goblins are there, but like the Dalai Lama says, they can be deleted. They can be sent to the black hole of Club Med, or Club Med in the black hole. No offense to Club Med. So we breathe. And this steady application of stillness sets forth a space, right? It sets up a resonant field. And the heart is a 50,000 femtotesla resonant field, and your brain is only 10. And so where the brain is hijacked to show, it must surrender to the heart, right? Well, that's what you see. Hear that? Like, the train agrees, right? Celebrating this descent from the brain into the heart. Now we think, what? 10 femtoteslas? What's the deal with the brain? Actually, what that doesn't do is give credit to the brain as a hormonal master control center of a whole different variety. Right? It's a pressure grid center determining the atomic table adjustment of your body. And it's all based on pH and pressure and alkaline. Where's the hydrogen in your body? Is there too much? Is there too little? If you have pain, there's probably too little hydrogen. So we're listening into the atomic table of the body. Let's just go to this pressure grid for a minute. Oxygen, this is a very little known fact. Oxygen is 90% of your energy. We think, but what about food? Yes, but you only eat 3 times a day. And you're not out in the sun that long. And even the food is made of oxygen, right? Protein is 25%. Carbs are almost 50. And so you're breathing all day long, 24 hours, supplying your body with tremendous prana shakti. 90% of your power is propelled by Shakti, power of oxygen. Okay, so let's employ it. All right, this is free stuff. Oh, at least for now. So we breathe. Imagine getting an oxygen bill in the future. Okay, free. Let oxygen be free. Okay, we're breathing it in. It's free. We're free. Feel the freedom. Dalai Lama says, yes, happiness and beautiful family, beautiful life, and liberation and enlightenment. Both. Yoga and Boga. It's all about the symmetry, right? Feel the symmetry of meditation, the symmetry of their mind, the symmetry of the hemispheres, the symmetry of the heart, the symmetry of hands, feet, legs. The symmetry drives order, which creates harmony, coherency. So if you're all over the place, spaced out and disturbed, then you need to come back to coherency. Right? The in-breath will gather these things together. All of your like, and it's like a cyclone of everything coming in, and then you stream it out like a laser-like stream of breath. And that creates the coherency of the chakras. It allows the mind to come to peace. It aligns the breath with the heart. The heart is pounding. The heart is sending a huge sound down, and it bounces off where it splits to the legs and comes flying back up. And if your breath is not in sync with that aortic explosion, you're going to be agitated, right? So what does meditation do? It brings your heart and your breath into synchronicity. It quiets both of them down. I'm going to quiet this music down a little bit. Perfection 44, Spotify it. Can't deny it. Let's breathe. Heart rate slowing down. Breath requires less oxygen when we meditate. They can bury some yogi in a box for 3 days underground, and they go, how did that guy breathe? It's breathing through his Sushumna channel, right? This guy's hardly breathing, but he's moving the prana, or she, whoever it is in the box, moving the prana up and down within the being, like cave yogis. It's almost like they put themselves in an ice box and everything is so still and quiet. There's no aging, there's no catabolic activity hardly. It's all anabolic, you're just building. That's it, free oxygen. Oxygenate. We forget to breathe, right? If we forget to breathe, how are we going to remember the self? The cosmic supreme I amness. So we breathe to remember the self. We remember the self to be free of all these afflictions. It's like when I taught 5th grade, you don't want to scold that kid in the class. You want to take that little brat outside, give him a little talking to. That's the contingency. Then bring him back in, and you can continue with your class, right? You have to sort of isolate the problem, almost from beyond the mind-body. It's hard within the confines of the problem to solve the problem, right? This famous Einstein thing. So we go outside, 3D, 4D, outside body, mind, time. And where is that? That's right there, just right there, observing. It's containing everything, mysteriously. Just notice this. Let that stillness heal you. We're going to bake that rage, bake that worry. Worry pie. Cook it. Poof, ashes, gone. And then you're just left in the empty space of liberation. then there's more room for new, fresh thoughts. Worry is ultimately not a great strategy because it's not a creative one. There's far better opportunities, right? Far more creative possibilities than worry, wart, whip around, right? The same old, same old. It's like we become professional warrior. We want to be a warrior, not a worrier, right? So the warrior stands strong. The warrior's like Gandhi, can handle conscious suffering, can endure. And then after a while, the endurer survives, right? And is restored to the expanse of the idealistic situation, right? Of the cause that the endurer was holding out for. The satyagraha, says Gandhi, right? The truth force. Truth, satya, agraha is this pillar of power. So this truth pillar, kind of a masculine image, right? It's like you just stand there like a warrior, who can mess with you, right? So that's a powerful thing. That's the spine, right? That's you sitting for meditation. That's the axis mundi, goes to the heavenly, to the earth, connects all the worlds. Here we are, connecting all the layers, all the worlds. Let's just float there in the moment, in the power of now. The body's point of projection is now. The body is the past, ultimately. It is your unconscious brain, mind. If you want to know what's going on there, look at your body. It's acting it out. It doesn't lie. It's your best friend. Your mind could be a lying son of a thing, but your body is this innocent, loving child that keeps saying, he's lying, don't. That's why body language reveals the truth, right? So we go deep into the authentic self. Worry, anger is from self-doubt. It's from an inauthentic platform. There's the use of force comes from that. The use of power, real power, you do not need to justify, is authentically present. That's the logic here. We're resting in our authentic power. Just feel that. Being very comfortable with just being is the ticket. Because anger and rage, all these things come from some idea that you didn't get something, or your path to success was blocked, or you were insulted, or you were hurt by some aggressive agency. It's like, oh, poor me. And that hurt is so painful that it starts to get angry, right? We get angry. And then it just, okay, so nip it in the bud. Filling up with love and abundance restores the emptiness that drives this lack, that drives this anger. And when we really get going with the rage, call it the fight, or the fight portion of the fight flight gives you a super boost of energy, right? That's just enough to handle and figure out the situation. Then your body converts to a whole nother dopamine structure. Basically, it's like a whole different set of hormones kick in for longer term, arousal, vigilance thing. But initially, you're given this surge, right? The catecholamines explode, and you can pick up a car, right? There's all sorts of adrenaline going on, all kinds of magical chemicals, but unfortunately, that could turn you into a rageaholic. And so we want to catch it before the catecholamine party. So it's right before the hormonal explosion. So if we can nip that, catch it with your breath, breathe through it. Notice where you might be stressed, breathe through that. Let's just go to the stillness. Just feel that blanket that comes in and it knocks out the charge, reduces the inflammation, it calms the situation, resolves the fire element that drives the anger. It's interesting, isn't it? Thoughts are kind of organized, but emotions do strange stuff, right? They're kind of non-linear. They're like a strange entity, right? They're not very comprehensible. So by just observing them, we stare them down on some level. Like really ridiculous thoughts could be trying to hijack you, and you just look at those thoughts and go, "You idiot. Who are you?" And they're like, "Oh, pardon me. I'm out of here. Busted." These lies will hijack you. There's this wonderful story. I told this maybe several months ago in one of these meditations, but it's the story of a guy who showed up at a therapist and he was really upset that he had dropped his toy soldier out a car window when he was like 4. The therapist's like, "Really? You're still worried about that, are you?" And he's like, "Oh," I burst in uncontrollable tears and he's like, "Oh, poor me." And so the therapist regressed with him back to figure out what was going on. So they went back to the 4-year-old and he figured out in the regression that he had intentionally dropped the soldier out the window to see what would happen. But then he had decided that the wind had swept away the toy soldier and he blamed it on that, and poor him, he was the victim, robbed of his soldier, poor me. And then that story perpetuated for 40 years or whatever it was. And because you could maybe argue that because it was a lie, because it wasn't true, it just festered in there to the point where it just demanded that he go back and fix it. And once he realized, "Oh my God, I'm actually totally guilty. I dropped that toy soldier out the window. What an idiot am I to think otherwise," right? So that resolved that. So there's maybe one little example of how your consciousness in trying to justify your situation has, declared that it's just not true, whatever it is, when you know perfectly well it is, and then you come to believe it is not true. You think it's not true because you've convinced yourself. So we lie, right? And these lies are problematic over time. This train agrees. So how about this for a little mini dharana, a little mini meditation? What potential lies might be burbling up in your consciousness right now? What have you said to yourself? What sort of illusions are you running? What kind of fantasy might you be still in that's not actually helping you? Let's just take a minute and see what comes up, right? With this kind of framing, this referencing. And if you're not resonating with, maybe think, "Well, I don't tell myself any lies. I'm pretty honest." That may be true. And so let's just go to that light, that love, that deep self revealer it's also a concealer, right? It's hiding from us. And yet it is us, it's everything. you kind of have to have software to see it, right? It's going to have to be able to look into the invisible. The Dalai Lama says there's 3 interesting categories. There's what's, in terms of causality, like there's what's visible, what you can see with your senses, right? It's what's obvious. I think they call it judicial observation now that they've just signed in our newest Supreme Court. Remember? There's this observation capacity. Nope, I just lost my train of thought, sorry. Thinking about the Supreme Court Justice. Dana, what did I just say?
Okay, I got distracted too with those disturbing news.
Disturbing news hijacks the brain. Okay, cancel, rewind. Okay, so maybe someone typed something, whatever the last thing I said was. I remember I was with my friend Filippo the other day, and he said he came out of meditation once, and he still had his guitar in his lap, and he'd gone so deep, he was so gonzo, he like, chords? Like, what are those? Right? You just could barely function from the deep state. So anyway, obviously my brain has been hijacked. And let's say that's a good thing. And I'm gonna breathe, and wherever the thread wants to come back, I'm gonna pick it up. I notice that sometimes happens when I'm talking too much. It's like the universe is saying, enough, that's enough information for these people. That's too much, even for your brain. Okay. So we're just gonna drop back into meditation. Good feeling attracting the healing. Let all the information that's come in find its place in your body, in your mind. When I was in graduate school for 8 years, I was so full of books and information that, the 3 reasons according to Dalai Lama, thank you, Iris. I'll be back to that. Now I think my mind is just shutting down here. So the Dalai Lama says that there's the sensory world, right? That's obvious. And I said judicial obviousness. Then there's the invisible world that by practicing, by doing things, we can penetrate into the essence of it, right? We can go deeper. We can understand emptiness. We can understand what's secret. But then the third category I love, he says, then there's that which is beyond, you will never know, right? This is just, the secret of the universe is beyond. And it stays a secret and will probably always be a question rather than an answer kind of thing. So anyway, Dalai Lama is saying many, many things. Let's just go back to this original idea of his that anger can be obliterated. Right? In other words, we can cook these afflictions with spiritual practice, ultimately by doing good work, by having patience. Maybe the key word is acceptance, right? It's a kind of surrender to what is. Because usually the mind's problem is that it doesn't like what is, and it wants to change it. And that's a problem, right? We don't like reality all of a sudden, and we'll go to extreme lengths to control it. And if you're a control freak like me, I think we're all control freaks on some level. Some of us are pathological. That can get out of control. Right? Too much control is force. not necessary. Much better just surrender, accept the universe. So let's just do that. We're just going to accept the universe for what it is, and all of its wonderfulness, all of its craziness. When we don't react, then we're neutral, right? And neutral is one of the most powerful positions to be in, because you can strike from any direction. It's like the Zen master, the martial artists. I did some studying with Dr. Cam Ewan. This is one of his great understandings, right? These Shaolin monastery people figured out they could look at you, figure out where you're weak, and then strike you there. But then over the centuries, they figured out it was actually more useful to use that observation of weakness to heal the person. So if we know where the person's weak, we can correct that or help them correct that, right? That's what energy medicine ultimately is. And so let's say this idea of neutral allows us to, neutral positive puts you in a place where negative cannot get you, right? Negative is going to be a 49% platform at that point, because you are the 51%er, right? You're the major shareholder, dude. You're the CEO of your power. And that's the 51% platform. And then anger, all these ultimately are strategies to get what you want, right? To deal with things. Then they become irrelevant. That's the kind of the ultimate Buddhist perspective of the middle path, right? That these extremes begin to kind of balance themselves out as you come to the pure emptiness that's so full. And speaking of the emptiness that's so full, let's just feel that fullness and coming to the end here for today. So we just want to breathe, feel that fullness. So as a kind of finale here, just in case I forgot some stuff, I'm just going to look over some of these solutions. So here they come, right? This is a whole list. Trogyam trunkpa, regarding anger. Don't suppress it, but don't act on it. I think this is Ben Franklin. Anger is never without a reason, but seldom a good one. And Sobonfo Some from Africa, who work with the Dagara language, says that ultimately anger is healing, or can carry a healing energy, but only when we don't let it overtake our being and hold us prisoner, right? So anger is actually useful. It liberates us in different ways. We talked about distracting yourself from anger. That may be one of the best ideas, especially if it's mental, right? Watch TV, go to a happy movie. Because when you're happy, it's really hard to be angry. Put it that way, right? That's this idea that abundance is a solution. Oh, and in the title of this talk, I called it the rasa of anger. And I just wanted to explain that because I was going to save that for tomorrow, but I'll give you the quick version. Rasa is kind of means taste in Sanskrit. It's kind of a generalized emotion. And kind of like Marshall Rosenberg identifies 9 needs, these ancient sages identify that there's 9 basic emotions, and that each one has the ability to make your mind quiet in a very interesting way, so you experience the self. So what does that mean? Let's say you get so mad at someone that you are just foaming and seething, and it stops your brain. basically. You're just like, ah. And at that point, because your brain has been hijacked and arrested ultimately, and you should be arrested, no, and then the Supreme Self rises up through that opportunity, right, of the stillness, because you're not blocking it with your thoughts and your rage and all your stuff. Suddenly you hit this point of like, of almost paralysis of wrath, and then the Supreme Self bursts forth. Another example would be the heroic, the heroic rasa, where the quarterback throws the touchdown pass and everyone in the stadium is awaiting the possible touchdown, and there's this beautiful silence of suspended belief, suspended anticipation, and then maybe he drops it, everyone freaks out, or he catches it, and there's this explosion of joy as the normal thoughts that would be there are not there, and then this kind of more massive aspect of us just explodes out because there's plenty of room to do that. So each of these emotions has the capacity to take us into almost an ecstatic state, right, of suspended amazingness. Matter of fact, one of the rasas is amazingness. And haven't you noticed that if you go to the Grand Canyon and you look at it, it's just so amazing, your brain is gone, right? You're just, the massiveness of the view completely expands your mind. So anyway, that's the rasa idea. And so that suggests that rasa has a flavor, that anger actually has a flavor to it that we're kind of addicted to because it does this to us, right? You get yourself so heated up that you have a revelation that your brain just stops and you're a fountain of potential intelligence, or maybe not. So it could go the other way. So anyway, so many wonderful things to talk about. Mañana, we're gonna talk a little more. I was thinking more music presentation tomorrow, kind of use what we're doing and work it through and flow through some of these problems. So, namaste, everyone. Have a beautiful evening. Thank you so much for being here. I love you, love you. Namaste, namaste.